Iram was at work cutting onions. The boss said that everyone had already arrived early in the morning. But if you work in a restaurant, you have to get up early. He was hungry and asked if they had anything. And I asked Devon to make a bibimbap. He hadn't eaten it for a long time. Devon seemed to be asking if the director had already come. He didn't want to do anything, but the director insisted that Devon didn't translate the topic and cook dishes for him, considering there weren't 100 visitors yet, and he was terribly hungry. Devon replied that he couldn't cook anything because the ingredients hadn't been prepared yet. The boss said that Devon could entrust the preparation of the ingredients to Sanyong, but he replied that he had to control the process himself, because nothing would work if he did not observe from the side. The boss, laughing, asked what he wanted to control there. He just shirked from work. Devon said that if the director continues to distract him, then the work will stop. And the director was telling Devon that he had been behaving abominably lately, because he was actually his director. Is this really an empty sound for Devon? If the director decided to behave like this, then Devon was the cook in the kitchen and he was in charge, so he could not afford to waste food senselessly. The boss couldn't believe his ears. Was it a waste of food to cook a bibimbap for the director? Devon reported that this is a loss, because at least there is no benefit. And Devon told the boss that if he wanted, he could cook himself. Then he turned to the assistant so that Iram would cook him a bibimbap. Iram agreed and asked to wait. The boss praised the young man for how well-mannered he was. Devon certainly didn't like it. Iram served the boss a bibimbap and he rather wanted to try it and thank the young man for the food. Taking the plate in his hands, the boss was surprised at how delicious it smells and whether the cream was mixed well. He thought he felt that way because he was hungry. Taking a piece in his mouth, he turned and looked at the young man. Devon was sitting smoking and the boss, coming up to him, asked him to instruct the newcomer to cook bibimbaps. Devon asked if that was all the boss wanted to tell him, but he asked the boss to let the young man cook not only bibimbap, but also other dishes. He should have started training Iram. The boss did not think that the young man was so simple. Devon didn't understand what was wrong. Then the boss informed him that even if he was not a gourmet, he was still the owner of this restaurant. And their new employee was the winner of many awards and he was talented. And more importantly, his food was incredibly delicious. The boss thought it was stupid to keep such a person as an assistant in the kitchen. And the boss believed that if they continued in the same spirit, then Anner would never expand quickly. And he believed that Iram was worthy of becoming a sous chef. Devon laughed because where has it been seen that a chef had a sous chef in a diner? The director didn't understand if he had said something strange, because the guy was really good. Then Devon asked if the director wanted to hear his opinion. How could he know? Because the young man had cooked only one dish, and they already want to promote him. Sous chef, it's been bothering Devon since the last time. Iram was standing and then gloves flew into his back. Devon asked Iram if he hadn't told him how to store rubber gloves, because if he put them in the sink, they would become dirty and moldy. The young man apologized again. He said that he had hung them up, but they must have fallen. And Devon told the young man that Tim had been pissing him off lately. Didn't he realize that he had become too mistaken about himself, inspired by his success? Iram reported that this was not the case. Then Devon went to the young man and said that he had heard that the young man was an award winner. Maybe he wanted to move Devon by using the victories in some university culinary competitions. Did Iram really think that they become the head of the kitchen for culinary skills? This is career building. You need to know how to organize time and gain experience, Devon explained to Iram. And continuing to chat, Iram interrupted him, asking if Devon was overreacting. It seemed to Devon at first, but then the young man asked him again if he was overreacting. Devon asked if the young man was crazy. Then Iram said that Devon could have been more polite, because Iram could not believe that the cook was talking about the uselessness of his own cooking skills. The basis of cooking is technique and skills, and if Devon is a real cook, then it must be an immutable truth for him, Iram said. Devon flared up again and asked what the jerk said. Mary broke into the conversation asking what was wrong with the boss today. He kept snapping at Iram talking about the skills that were the foundation. Apparently the young man was arrogant, Devon thought. According to the boss, Iram thought that he would turn a blind eye to everything he does, since others praise him. Iram said that he would not go back on his words and it did not matter what the boss would say to him. His skills and personality do not allow Iram to respect Devon. Mary has already asked to stop Iram. Devon was yelling at the young man to cool his head. Devon was the head of the kitchen at Anner's Bistro, and it didn't matter to him who Iram was or how he spoke. This was his kitchen, not a place for discussions. Iram thought to himself that there was a piece of shit in front of him and that he was disappointed with him. Devon used his position to insult his subordinates. This time he even stooped to direct insults. Iram saw no reason to stay here. Devon continued to pour insults. The young man said that there was no need to look for anything and just let Devon continue to work here as the head of the kitchen, as always, because now Iram is not going to stay here. And taking off his apron, he thanked for the support. Mary and Devon were both shocked that the young man had left like that. Mary asked the young man not to behave like that, and the boss stopped the young man. And then Devon, calling Iram a jerk, demanded to return to his place. But then I told him to get lost, because they could do it without him. Iram was spoiling everything from the very beginning. At that moment, the boss came in, not understanding what was happening in the kitchen. Iram left and thought about what he had promised himself, that he would endure any circumstances. He was definitely a burden to everyone, but even if he lost his sense of taste, smell, he cut off all ties. He couldn't afford to insult his honor as a cook. It's not just to amuse pride, it hurts Iram's desire to live. It seemed to the young man that he would die if he did not upgrade his skills. But he thought Devon was right. Iram was thinking that he couldn't even handle being an assistant. How could he find his place in the world of cooking? However, even knowing this, he couldn't take it anymore. No one knows that Iram cannot throw away this pride and what he should do now. Sitting on a bench, the young man was thinking about it. Then Lim Cham came up to him and asked if the young man remembered him, because last time he gave him his business card. Iram replied that, of course, he remembers. It was a relief for the man, because he thought that the young man would not remember him. The man followed him when the young man came out of the bistro and asked if everything was all right. Iram said that everything was fine and thanked the man for his care. Lim heard what that cook said to the young man and how after such words he could still work. The young man asked why this gentleman was here. He said that he wanted to offer the young man something. He wanted Iram to work in his restaurant and offered to become a real chef for him. The young man looked at the boss in surprise and did not understand how he could offer him to be the boss. Then the man reminded him about the business card he gave the young man in the restaurant. The name of the restaurant Changmeng was on the business card. The man wanted to invite the young man to work in his restaurant, but being the owner, he wanted to test the cook's abilities first. The young man looked sadly at the ground and told the chief that there was nothing special about his abilities. The man tried to find out from the young man why he thought so. Perhaps he did not realize how gifted he was. He considered the young man very modest and decided to ask why he quarreled with the head of the kitchen. Our hero explained to the man that what happened in the restaurant could not even be called a quarrel. There was a simple misunderstanding between him and the head of the kitchen. The young man's opinion did not coincide with the opinion of his superiors, and his actions were perceived incorrectly. The young man was in an extreme situation. He told himself that he would work hard, but no one could guarantee that the employee could be to everyone's liking. The young man replied. Then the man asked why the young man did not want to realize his goals, because he had the whole world ahead of him and it was impossible to look at the world so sullenly. In order not to happen to him in the past, the man offered the young man to look into his future and think about him. Lim Cham told Iram that during his 70 years he had managed to try himself in many ways. One day he caught fire with a new idea, and then it was the decision to open a restaurant. It happened quite recently. The place was empty and therefore Lim Cham was looking for purposeful people who would revive it. Our hero looked at Lim Cham and told him his story about how he was once a chef, but after a car accident he lost his sense of taste and smell. Iram thanked fate for such a chance. But if he accepted the offer to work in a restaurant, then Lim Cham would have to put up with his problems. And looking sadly at the ground, he replied that he could not. But Lim Cham put his hand on the young man's shoulder and said that it was not a problem and there was no need to despair. The man offered the young man to be interviewed. Lim Cham couldn't let such a nugget slip out of his hands. He did not hire employees just like that. Everything was official. And with these words he stretched out his hand to the young man. Our hero looked in surprise with all his eyes at the man who stood in front of him, and with a shaking hand, he reached out to the man. They decided to conduct an interview. Arriving at the restaurant, our hero was surprised that the man had previously called him small, but that's how he perceived it. The young man said that when he passed by, he saw how the construction of this restaurant was going on. A lot of money was invested in the restaurant. It was beautiful and the design of the room looked great. And the man joked about the fact that the restaurant looked a little old-fashioned. The young man was delighted with the restaurant, and he saw the design as original and modern. And our hero told his future boss that his house was nearby, right behind the police station. It was a 5-minute walk from here, so convenient it turned out. The man thought the restaurant was meant to be built right here, and he invited the young man to go inside. Going inside the restaurant, our hero was pleasantly surprised by what he saw. The man talked about the cozy atmosphere of the restaurant as if asking the young man how, in his opinion, it was. The young man agreed with him. The restaurant looked very cozy. And now, most importantly, Iram was asked to go to the kitchen. When Iram saw the dishes, he was absolutely delighted. She was all shiny. Lim Cham explained to him that since the restaurant was just in the process of opening, the owner bought everything new. At that moment, the owner realized that he did not know the young man's name. The young man introduced himself. The man was surprised that Iram had only one hieroglyph in his name, and he asked if he could just call him Iram. After the official presentation, the boss offered to start the interview with Iram. Lim Cham asked the young man to cook him any dish of his choice, if he was confident in his skills. The young man was surprised by the request. He clarified whether he could cook what he wanted, and the boss explained to Iram that in order to hire a chef, it was necessary to try the dish he had prepared. The man suggested the young man to cook some famous Korean dish. Bibimbap is also suitable. And our hero, surprised, decided to start cooking the dish. Lim Cham was looking forward to it, because the previous bibimbap that the young man cooked was wonderful. The hero has a chance. Firstly, the dish had to relate to Korean cuisine. Free choice is both simple and difficult. The hero does not know how his decision will be because all his skills and abilities will be evaluated with the help of one dish. There were different types of meat in the refrigerator, and also kimchi. There were not so many products, since the restaurant had not yet opened. There were basic sauces and seasonings that stood against the wall, and the young man was wondering if there was chili powder here. Looking into the blanks, he saw nothing but ramen, thin noodles, sesame oil, and the like. The young man was given freedom among numerous Korean dishes, but there were very few products, and the young man knew that he could not rely on taste and smell when cooking. But our hero did not despair and decided to proceed. The young man asked Lim Cham what he thought about noodles. The smell was wonderful in the restaurant. The noodles were boiling on the fire. The sauce was mixed, and the young man served spicy noodles with kimchi from radish shoots on the table. There was a beautiful dish on the table in front of Lim Cham. The man once cooked kimchi himself from radish shoots and praised the young man for his choice. The young man was surprised that the boss did it on his own, and the same one thought that he should have got an assistant, because it was too scrupulous and long. Lim Cham tried the noodles, but before he could say anything, he was interrupted by a worker who came in from the street. He asked the director to feed him and complained about the heat outside. Noticing the young man, he decided to ask who it was, and the young man greeted him. Then the man decided to ask the director if it was his son or nephew. The young man explained that he was at the interview. The man asked Director Lim about it and introduced himself to the young man. The employee's name was Park Chul-ho. The young man also introduced himself and asked to take care of him. Then the man started asking how long the director was going to eat and why he didn't pay attention to anyone. Maybe something happened to him, the man reasoned aloud. But the director simply replied that he was eating. And then Park Chul asked for the same thing that the director had, even though he had no idea what he had on his plate, and added that Director Lim usually cooked for them. The young man brought noodles, and the man realized that it was noodles with kimchi from radish shoots. He told Iram that he often ate such a dish as a child. Also taking the chopsticks in his hands, Park Chul said that he did not want to underestimate the young man, but he believed that young people hardly know how to cook such traditional dishes, because for this a person had to have experience behind him. Old people know better what such dishes should taste like. The young man just smiled. Then thanking in advance, the employee decided to try. The noodles were soft and delicious. It was amazing. The man was trying to figure out what kind of noodles it was that he took in his mouth. At the same time, it was like a curling curl. The radish leaves were so juicy, spicy and crispy with sourness. It was so refreshing, as if Park Chul had plunged into the cool sea water and tipped the whole plate into his mouth. The man felt fresh and rejuvenated. Both men, Park Chul and Lim Cham, looking at the young man, shone with happiness that our hero involuntarily asked a question about whether he was accepted. Greeting the players in reality, a warning popped up and then the player was greeted already in the game itself. The time in the game was listed as 23.28 and a tip appeared on the screen. With the help of focal destructions, he could receive rare items. The young man was so relieved because everything went as well as possible and he was hired. And returning to the game so invigorated him, and the character inhaled the smell of grass. As soon as our hero returned to the game, the fatigue passed and everything pleased him so much. Perhaps the reason was that the young man had not played for a long time. Someone told Rice that he knew he would meet our hero here and his intuition did not let him down. and Sinkin waved his hand to him. He explained to his friend that he had been busy lately, and therefore did not enter the game, but when he returned, he found out that the young man had completed an important task. According to rumors, Sinkin knew that the young man had killed the lizard princess. Our hero confirmed his friend's guesses and asked if the other players had already talked about it. Sinkin told a friend that the news spread very quickly, and our hero did not plan to talk about it. Sinkin asked his friend not to be modest, because it was cool. Here Sinkin reminded the young man that Rice decided to play only in order to be able to cook and explained to the young man that there were very few people like him who were completely devoted to the game and enjoying it. And I asked the young man if he knew that in reality prizes were much more important. Each user is trying to achieve better results. One young man showed much better skills, besides he was an excellent cook. It was something unusual. And then Sinkin asked to add him as a friend as a raid ally. Our hero agreed. Then Rice decided to ask his friend where they were going. Then Sinkin told the young man about the common area, about which he had never heard before. And Sinkin teased his friend that he knew almost nothing about the game. Our hero was sure that the newcomers played only in the forest zone, and this zone was called the beginner zone, said a friend. Then Sinkin decided to ask which zone Rice chose when he created the character. The young man then just used a random choice. Sinkin informed the young man that it was the wrong decision, because when they come out of the forest, they will find themselves in a common area. There was a map in front of them, and a friend explained everything to our hero. Sinkin believed that if they only ate and wandered, they would only know a small part of the entire map. Sinkin decided that now he would have to explain everything to his friend. Rice should have seen that they were now finally in the common area, and Sinkin was rather calling a friend to look. This is the real beginning of the game, the Korean Common Zone. There was a huge field of green grass in front of the heroes and characters who used magic according to Sinkin fought around. For some reason, the atmosphere here was different, our hero thought. There was no tension in the beginner zone, but for some reason everyone was fighting here. Pigs were jumping on the characters all around. Sinkin was very pleased that he was not a beginner. Rice was happy for his friend and asked what they would do first. Sinkin told the young man that they could do anything, but to start hunting. He registered for several purposes. A friend told Rice that there were monsters in this zone attacking first, and therefore the young man had to be careful. For example, a deadly bee that immobilizes with poison. The young man should have been on guard. The order was accepted, and if he can, he will overcome the bee and get honey. Sinkin said goodbye to his friend and went hunting, finally asking if the young man had added him as a friend. Rice, of course, added a friend and offered to play together next time. For Sinkin, Rice's offer sounded great, and he shook hands with his friend and went on hunting. Then suddenly a melody wrapped around his legs, while the young man was thinking about cooking, and this song seemed familiar to him. It was the song Heart of the Stars that Sinkin was humming. Turning to our hero, Sinkin noticed that this was his new skill. Rice was surprised, and a friend told him that this profession was bard. This skill was called battle song, and he said goodbye to a friend. The young man went to another place and wondered what kind of products he could get there. There was a village in front of him, and he couldn't wait for his adventure. When they came to the village, people offered green spheres for only 3,001. Someone offered wolf skin for only 23,001. In general, the young man got to the market where you could buy anything. Users turned the place into a retail outlet, and it was all like a rural area. And our hero saw the blacksmith at work. He could even feel the heat from the anvil. Further along the course there was a shop, and their users sold and bought various potions. A guy in a circle of other men held a bottle with pink filling in his hand. Here Rice was concerned about the moment that there were no children in the village. Probably it was because the game was only for adults, but the situation still seemed restless to him. He had not seen a single child character, and there were few adults in the village, but perhaps it was somehow connected with the quest, the young man thought. Then, thinking that he was paranoid, he decided that it was still fun to hang around the local neighborhood. A diner appeared before his eyes. He knew that there would be at least one such place, and he wondered what kind of food they were selling. Entering the diner, he was greeted by a woman, and our hero, greeting in response, asked for a table for one. The woman, taking the order, asked the young man what he would like and apologized for the narrow choice of dishes. There was only bread and soup. Rice was surprised that these positions were the only ones, but he agreed anyway. He didn't expect much from the place, but he didn't think the menu would be so meager. In front of the young man was a pottage and bread with a glass of water. Everything was not so bad, since the food cooked by the young man in the game was quite tasty. Then the dish in front of him should not have disappointed him, so our hero thought, and after trying the soup, he began to spit. The young man did not understand how such a thing could be served in an institution. Rice decided to wash down the soup with water because it had no taste at all. Even instant soup would be better, our hero thought. That's why no one went to this place, Rice thought. It was his first time in the diner during the whole game and his impression was immediately spoiled. He couldn't eat what was on the table in front of him. He thought that he would put some chicken to give juiciness. The taste would be richer thanks to meat broths, and he would add a fried egg inside the bread. With these thoughts, the young man wanted to eat terribly. Although just a few days ago he was ready to chew grass, but first of all he was a cook and could not code to feel the taste. Everything was indifferent, but now adding the ingredients it became like a hedgehog. There was chicken soup and bread with an egg in front of the young man. After trying his dishes, he, as he thought, added richness to the meat broth and the soup could be eaten. The bread was a little harsh, but the egg compensated for this with its juiciness. It was a success, and our hero decided to taste everything that he himself had done. It was so delicious that the young man could not hide his emotions while sitting at the table. A woman who worked in a cafe came up to him with apologies and apologized. Asked at that moment, the young man received a new task. Was it possible that he was a cook? A question mark hung over the woman's head and Rice realized that he had received a task. He was wondering what the quest would be like this time. The young man replied that he was really Varus and smiled at the woman. She immediately realized this by the pleasure with which our hero ate. The young man wondered what kind of quest he had. If he had to fight again, it would be quite problematic for him, the young man thought. He wondered that if a woman asked him about food, then maybe everything could be fine. The woman looked at our hero and was interested in the experience of the young man. She was interested to find out if he was a professional chef or if it was his hobby. And as soon as our hero started talking about being a chef, the woman in front of him disappeared, and when he turned around she was already eating his soup. The young man was scared and decided to ask how hungry the woman was. She just wanted to taste the food since she had such a chance. In fact, the woman knew that her food left much to be desired. However, she decided to ask the chef how her food was to him and asked the young man to answer this question honestly. Rice looked at her and did not know what to say to him. There were two options to choose from, to say that it was delicious or to say that the food was so-so. Even in the game, the young man as a chef had to be objective and decided to choose the answer option so-so, because it was true. At this moment, the woman's face was distorted by a grimace and she began to be indignant. But then she came to her senses and began to talk aloud that if her food was delicious, the institution would not be empty and asked Rice to teach her how to cook dishes. The young man thought that he should have helped the woman. The screen showed two possible answers again. Our hero could agree to help or say that he was too tired. And Rice asked the woman if she didn't mind. He would cook the dishes himself. It turned out to be such a quick update that we will have to prepare everything all over again. First, Rice had to choose the right ingredients. It was not so difficult to cook the dishes, and the young man set to work. The screen showed a professional quest, a requirement, to cook a meal that would raise Roseland's satisfaction level above 70%. The reward was an increase in Roseland's favor. What kind of professional quest it was, the young man did not know. The hostess of the establishment approached him, and he asked her to try the dishes that Rice had prepared. The woman looked with delight at the dishes that looked appetizing. After tasting it, she thanked the young man, saying that this time the taste was no worse. But the level of satisfaction rose only by 32%, and then the woman mentioned that she did not like chicken. But the young man did not understand why she said that, because before that the woman ate soup with pleasure. Next, the woman decided to try bread. There was hardly a single person who would not appreciate bread with an egg. According to her expression, the young man could not understand anything. The woman was just chewing bread. But then she jumped up and began to praise the bread that our hero had prepared, thereby even scaring Rice a little. The young man was pleased that she appreciated the bread. The young man decided to ask out loud if the hostess liked it. She, of course, replied that she was satisfied with the food. His skills reminded her of strangers coming from the Red Spider Forest. The young man asked about the strangers, and the hostess told him a story about how life in the village used to look like. Previously, the village of Turco, to which the young man came, was full of life. The territory was huge, and travelers from all over the world came here, the woman said. Houses, eateries, shops, and all these establishments flourished in the village. But one day the devil Raiden appeared. This devil took away all the knowledge from the people from the continent of Azella, and they were left with almost nothing, rejoicing at least that the devil did not destroy them all. The village was no exception, and it was then that the woman lost the ability to cook everything except a miserable soup and bread. The young man was surprised that this task had a backstory. Human knowledge stolen by the devil. But then the young man asked the hostess why she called him a stranger. She also replied that the devil had created a hole in the dimension and the people who came to this zone to help were called strangers. The young man realized that it was users like him. Since they were talking about this topic, the woman had a question. Would Rice like to learn her recipes? But then the young man, reasoning out loud, said that the woman did not know any recipes and got confused. The professional quest stated that he was supposed to be Roslana's mentor. The woman explained that in their village they could only use the ingredients that were already there. Quest requirements: unmistakably cook 2 dishes according to Roslan recipes. The ingredients could be obtained within the village. Reward: increasing the favor of Roslan. Get a recipe for honey wine, get hidden achievements. This was how all the requirements of the quest and its rewards sounded, which our hero could receive after completing. The recipe for honey wine was very much to Rice's liking, and the young man agreed to Roslan's terms. He decided to clarify about the ingredients that he had to find within the village, and the young man went in search, saying goodbye to the hostess. There were no unicorn roosters or lizards in the village, so he couldn't use his ingredients. To begin with, Rice decided to take a walk and find out what was being sold in the village. Passing through the village, he saw a crowd of people who were trying to feed someone. But this someone refused the food that passers-by offered him, and the young man decided to come over to see what was happening there. People gathered around the little cat and tried to feed him human food, but he did not want to eat it, and it was decided to call a doctor, only they were not here. The young men tried to decide among themselves why the cat did not eat such food. Rice, on the other hand, looked at the animal in surprise, because it was the first time he had seen a cat in reality. This is definitely not part of the game, the young man thought. Then the cat saw Rice calm down and a question arose over his head. The young man realized that it could be a quest. Maybe it was part of the task, Rice thought. The young man sitting next to him just wanted to take the cat with him. Rice called the cat and he obediently went to him. The young man was the cat did not want to eat what he was offered. The guys behind were surprised. Scratching the cat, Rice asked him questions, and the cat gently purred in response. The young men looked with all their eyes and did not understand what this little prankster wanted, gently rubbing his muzzle on Rice's hand. It was such a cute sight that everyone began to be touched. This kitten was not to please. Rice was sitting next to the kitten and now he understood why everyone loved cats so much. The cat was very cute. The young man began to realize that thanks to the game he began to understand other people. Then, looking more closely at the cat, Rice saw that the question mark had disappeared. The quest was called Tired Kitten and there was a favor in it. The cat asked to get honey for him, and our hero was ready to help the kid at all costs. Honey was a rare ingredient that our hero was thinking about, and then the young man remembered that a deadly bee lived near the place where he was. He needed honey to complete the quest with the cat, but the young man began to doubt whether he could do it. But the cat was so cute that the young man decided to do everything for him. The reward for this quest was unknown. The young man tried to say goodbye to the cat, promising to feed him. But for now the kitten had to stay and wait for him here. But as soon as our hero took his hand away from him, the kitten did not want him to leave. The young man, looking after him, could not leave him. The kitten seemed very cute to him. The young man went to the bazaar again and they offered to buy anything. There were more people. But since this game was for adults, it was not surprising that users came in late at night. He was walking down the street and looking around. Then a scene between 2 players appeared to his attention. Rice felt like he was in a real market because of the pandemonium. People were selling eyeballs for 50,000 won. Someone wanted to buy it right away, attacking the seller. Someone was selling a stone face of red and blue color for only 100,000 won. The young man saw the serious scope of this market, where there were many professional traders. Passing on, he saw that food was being offered at the market and realized that even she was being sold here, and suddenly saw a familiar face. The guy who recently bought a huge amount of chicken kebabs, resold them on the market, and even with a margin. Our hero thought that it was none of his business, but it was not good to inflate the price so much. It was the most ordinary food, the young man thought, and the price for it is lower than street food in the market. Then he was called and it was Ader. He did not expect to see our hero here and was very glad that they met, and now the young man was in the common area. By the way, he recognized Rice by his shoes. Rice was also glad to see Ader and thanked him for the net, thanks to which he was able to catch the lizard princess. Ader was surprised that the young man dealt with the princess alone. But the young man replied to his friend that it was not necessary to fight with a partner and that he usually did everything himself. Ader was shocked that our hero defeated monsters on his own with the equipment he had. He explained to the young man that usually players like him wore clothes made from materials obtained during the battle. But Rice's clothes did not change at all. Rice listened to his friend with fascination. Ader complimented the young man, to which our hero smiled and decided to ask if Ader was still creating shoes. Ader replied to the young man that he could make not only shoes, but anything if he was provided with materials. The young man decided to think and see what he had. Then he took out the lizard skin. Ader was very surprised. Rice asked Ader to accept his order, to which he, saying that it was a big responsibility, doubted. Rice saw that the young man was nervous, so it was really special material. Then Ader agreed and asked the young man to bring him some more materials. Ader offered the young man to buy them at the market, and then meet. Rice left, and then they met. Ader apologized to his friend for